Hey, what is going on, Guardians? My name is the Black Link, and we are back once again to talk some Destiny 2. Of course, last night we had our release of the Bungie weekly blog, This Week at Bungie, for the week of April 12th, 2018. Today is Friday the 13th, and we're going to be covering some of the things that we learned in this week's TWAB. It's already been a pretty exciting week. At least in terms of news from Bungie, we've learned about the new DLC. It's titled Warmind, that it is indeed releasing in less than a month's worth of time on May 8th alongside the drop of 1.2.0 in Season 3. We've also learned about some of the incoming summer changes and even a little bit about some of the changes we'll be seeing in the expansion later this year. We cover all of that in depth in a previous video. I'll leave a link to it in the description if you want to go check out all of the new things that we've learned this week. But this week in the TWAB, they just kind of go over some of those things, like the changes to the Destiny 2 development roadmap. And of course, they talk a bit more about the Warmind DLC, but reiterate the fact that we'll be seeing our first trailer for it on April 24th, in just a few weeks' time. Still strikes me as a little weird that we're going to wait that long to have our first trailer, but we do know that this Destiny 2 summit that a lot of content creators have been invited out to is going to feature this new DLC, so I'm guessing we're going to be getting sort of the advertisement through them. Either way, I'm really excited to see more about this stuff, but what they talked about after that was even more interesting. In a section titled Ultimate Power, they talked a bit about how in Season 3, our power levels as Guardians and the way it affects our interactions with enemies are going to be seeing a change. Basically, they're going to be making the game harder. But don't take my word for it. Take the word of Bungie Combatant's design lead Tomonori Kinoshita, as this is what Tomo had to say. Hey folks, I'd like to let you know of an upcoming PvE difficulty tuning pass that should be hitting your consoles and PCs along with the beginning of Season 3. The main goals from this tuning pass are to provide a more challenging experience for players when they take on higher leveled activities. This should make power progression and acquisition more meaningful, reinforce and reward the energy type matching gameplay, and provide opportunities for our master PvEers to demonstrate their prowess at the highest levels. So, how are we going to tackle this? 1. They're going to change our outgoing damage scaling versus higher leveled combatants to be steeper. Basically, enemies who are a higher level than you out in PvE are going to be harder for you to take down. You're going to deal less damage to them. This is an attempt to make the game a bit more similar to the way things were in Destiny 1. If you remember, if you were like 2 levels beneath an enemy, you barely did any damage at all to them. It was very difficult to take down even red bars. But as a result, higher level combatants will take longer to kill than they currently do. But if you're at or above their level, you can still melt them like you've come to love with update 1.1.4. Like we've come to love, huh? I still argue that we're still a little bit too weak in PvE, although that might just be because we're missing stuff like small arms, or the real damage of burns that we had back in Destiny 1. Anyways, moving on. They're going to extend our outgoing and incoming damage scaling from capping at the 40 power level delta to a 50 power level delta. Currently, in Destiny 2, our scaling only affects the difficulty of combatants up to 40 power levels above the player before plateauing. Increasing this to 50 power levels adds a little more room for players to show off how badass they really are. Now, that's a nice statement, showing off how badass we really are. Really, what they're saying here is that enemies that are a higher level above you are going to become bullet spongier. I'm gonna wade through the development talk here and just break it down for you. Enemies are becoming bullet spongier. That's what's happening here. And it almost kind of seems like they're trying to butter that fact in, we're giving you an opportunity to be even more of a badass in PvE, when really all they're doing is they're just making enemies more difficult, which I'm not necessarily against. I don't mind an extra challenge, but that's kind of all it is. Anyways, let's continue. When combatants are 50 power levels or higher above the player, they will be immune and display a double question mark icon on their nameplate. This is the unknown. This is the old unknown icon. OG Guardians will probably remember the first time they stumbled across the hive in the depths of the Cosmodrome. We wanted to bring back that feeling of mystery and provide challenges for the player to come back to later in their journey. I love that. This is definitely something back from Destiny 1. If you remember in the Cosmodrome, if you head out to the shores and go down, you find the Celebrant of Oryx, especially during the beta days, and he was such a high level. He was so far above you, his level just showed up as double question marks, and he was almost impossible to beat. He was kind of like just an out there in-world roaming super boss. And I like that they're bringing that sort of mystique back. Anyways, moving forward, they're going to change combatant energy shields to fulfill the following. Matching energy element damage to shields is the most effective, roughly 3 times damage output plus the current shield detonation, where they explode and damage nearby enemies. This is going to be followed by non-matching energy, which will be roughly 2 times damage. So a normal, if an enemy has a void shield and you use a solar hand cannon, it will deal 2 times damage to that shield. If you use a void hand cannon to match that void shield, you're going to deal 3 times the normal amount of damage, which means you're going to be popping shields left and right. And then finally, kinetic damage won't have any bonus damage multiplier, of course. To further incentivize the matching game, the 3 times multiplier for matching damage types is not affected by the damage scaling of higher leveled combatants until the combatants display the $unknown nameplate. That means even if you're under leveled, you're still going to deal 3 times damage if you're matching up your elements to the enemy's shield. Pretty good. After that, they say the previous changes also allows us to bring back match game as an additional prestige Nightfall modifier for extra points and bragging rights. When this modifier is enabled, all non-matching damage to energy shields is reduced to 10%. So make sure your fire team is coordinating appropriately. The current plan is for match game to launch alongside with the rest of these difficulty changes. And of course, they finish things up by saying that they're looking forward to watching the community show off their PvE skills with these new changes. Now, overall, I like most of that. I don't mind enemies being a bit more difficult in high-level content when they're above me. Again, I think it's a little bit of some flowery speech just to avoid saying we're making them more bullet spongy, because a lot of enemies aren't that bullet spongy in Destiny 2. Like, right off the top of my head, I would say the gladiators, those cleavers from the Cabal. Those guys definitely take a lot of shots to take down, but for the most part, they don't feel too bad. And so I hopefully this doesn't evoke memories of Valis to Auric back in year 1 of Destiny 1, but that's basically what's happening here. You're going to deal less damage to enemies who are above your level. I still have a bit of a problem with the way power scaling works in Destiny 2. You never really actually get stronger in Destiny, you just get less weak. Granted, it was the same way in Destiny 1, where you start out under-leveled, so enemies are dealing a ton of damage to you, you're not dealing a ton of damage to them. You increase your power level so that they stop dealing as much damage. They start dealing less damage to you, but you never really deal more damage to those enemies. You get to a point where it plateaus off, and even if you're 40 levels above an enemy, you're not really going to deal more damage to them. It's still going to take 2 shots, body shots for most mobs and whatnot. So that still bothers me a little bit. I understand why it's in place. It was the same in Destiny 1. But I do like that they're changing up the whole matching energy weapons to shields sort of thing. I like that if you're matching an energy weapon to a shield, you're dealing 3 times damage. If you're just using a normal energy weapon, you're dealing 2 times damage. That's what energy weapons are for. They're meant to break shields faster. And so I like that they're kind of furthering that idea and incentivizing you to kind of match up your damage to the enemies that you're fighting. Match game coming back, I guess that's okay. I would still prefer small arms, please. Can we have a modifier that benefits the players? Please come back. I want my small arms back. But whatever, match game it's okay. Overall, these power level changes are just going to make the game a bit more difficult, especially in stuff like prestige raids. That's where you're really going to notice the extra damage that you're going to have to put out on enemies to take them down. Hopefully it doesn't make the game too grindy though. And there we go. That's actually some of the biggest bits of information we got from the TWAB here. It's mostly kind of focused on this whole power level change. And again, I don't really like the thought of enemies becoming more bullet spongy, especially since I already had an issue with how weak we felt in PvE. Thankfully, update 1.1.4 addressed that a bit. It gave us a nice damage buff to basically all weapon types in PvE. So I feel like now in the game we're dealing about as much damage as we should be against most enemies. But I still have a problem that, if you're going to make players weaker against enemies who are a higher level, which makes sense, you should be enemies that are way above you in power level should deal more damage to you. You should be weaker against them. I still feel like on some level that means if you're 40 levels above a dreg that you meet out in front of the church in the European Dead Zone, you should be able to deal more damage to that dreg when you're power level 335 and you head back there and whatnot. I understand why that isn't the case in the game right now, but if you're going to make us weaker, I also want to be stronger against the things that are weaker against me. And also, maybe think about bringing back the power level advantages in PvP. I would accept that too, with Iron Banner and all that kind of stuff. Don't make it active and competitive, but for stuff like Iron Banner, I kind of miss being able to just mollywop players who jumped in there at like power level 12. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on it, and I would love to hear yours. Be sure to let me know what you think of all these changes, especially the changes to power level, down in the comment section below. Are you liking the prospect of the extra challenge, or are you hoping that these enemies don't become Division-esque bullet sponges? Be sure to let me know. But if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest Destiny 2 news we're putting out. That's it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty.